Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for visiting the YouTube channel for bestbiblecommentaries.com. It's Theology Thursday, and in this video, I'm going to show you two theology books by a very well-reviewed Bible commentator, G.K. Beale. Before I do that, I invite you to subscribe to this channel if you're interested in seeing videos on biblical studies resources like Bible commentaries and theology books. Also, please consider clicking the thumbs up button on my videos, as that really helps push out my videos to people who might find them helpful. And feel free to leave a comment or ask a question down below. All right, many people know G.K. Beale from his work on Bible commentaries, probably because he has written what many consider the best reviewed commentary on the book of Revelation, and that's in the New International Greek Testament Commentary series. But he also writes theology books, and I'm showing you two here. There's the Story Retold, a biblical theological introduction to the New Testament, and a very fascinating theology book, although it's advanced. We Become What We Worship, a biblical theology of idolatry. So I'll say more about these in just a minute. Let me just give you a couple of the other titles that he has written. I'm just looking on the back of the book to make sure I get the titles right. So one is called The Temple and the Church's Mission, and that's in the IVP series. I think it's Biblical Theological Studies series, if I remember correctly. That's the series that's edited by D.A. Carson. And then in December, so in a few months from now, so December 2021, which is a few months from the making of this video, he comes out with another theology book on the temple. I don't remember the title of it, but I know it has a December release date. And then, of course, as I showed in my last video, him and G.K. Beale and D.A. Carson were the editors for the commentary on the New Testament use of the Old Testament. So those are a couple of his other works. So I'm just going to talk about each one of these resources and what you can expect if you were to acquire one of these and use them. Let's start with this one, The Story Retold. A biblical theological introduction to the New Testament. This is a new release. I think it's hasn't even been out for a year yet, as of the making of this video. It's about 530 pages in length. It's textbook type quality. It's very heavy stock paper, 2-column format, explanations and descriptions that are very easy to understand, full color pictures, outlines of every book. And I'll show you more of an example in just a minute. The first thing I want to do is talk about how this New Testament introduction is different than Old Testament introductions, and that's really the point of the preface here. And so in New Testament introductions, it's very common. The very common approach is to overview the basic facts of every book. So you start with Matthew and with Revelation. You talk about the author of each book, the setting of each book, the original audience of each book, the genre of literature. You know, is it biography? Is it apocalyptic? Is it epistle? And so on. So that's pretty conventional way. A recent trend has been to talk more about the sociocultural background. So talk about the sociocultural background of Romans, of Hebrews, of Revelation, and so on, and add that to the introduction, New Testament introduction. And I have seen that too. And I think all of that information, as someone who has taught Intro to New Testament dozens of times, I think all of that information is helpful to students. How this is different is that this book takes a Bible-wide approach to the New Testament introduction. So the authors write, this introduction explores each New Testament book in light of the broad history of redemption, a story that began with Adam and Eve in Genesis 1 through 3, and ends with the creation of the new heavens and new earth in Revelation 21 and 22. Every passage of the Bible, every paragraph in some way contributes to this narrative. So you do get the information on, so let me show you the example. I'm just going to pick out Acts. So you do get the information on authorship of Acts, the date of Acts, the genre of Acts, the purpose, the audience, the outline, and all of those are pretty standard pieces of information for introduction to New Testament books. But what you're also getting is what is really many people consider Beale's strength as a scholar, is that you're getting insight into how each book and writer utilizes the Old Testament, and not just literary examples like literary usage, like quotes and allusions and things like that, but the Old Testament narrative. So you understand, so the reader has a better idea of how the book of Acts fits into the 66-book narrative of the Bible, and not just the 27-book narrative of the New Testament. That's probably the best way to say it. So as you can see, you get the basic standard introductory information, and then there's a passage, a section on biblical theological themes. So here's a good example: Joel's prophecy of the Spirit and Pentecost. And then you do get a section by section overview that incorporates all of the introductory material, including the Bible insight into the Bible-wide narrative for that particular section of the book of Acts. So that's how this is different. That's how this approach is different. If and when I teach New Testament again, I would definitely consider using this book because I like. It's a very high quality book. Students, I love the professors, teachers, usually we're the ones who love the content. The students, though, they do appreciate a reader-friendly arrangement, the colorful pictures, and if that helps them engage with the actual content, then I like those things too. But as opposed to in contrast to some New Testament introductions, visual learners will really appreciate this book, I think. All right, let me show you the other book, another theology book by G.K. Beale. Just a fascinating, just the title alone and the subtitle are just fascinating to me. We Become What We Worship, a Biblical Theology of Idolatry. This book was published in 2008. And it is 341 pages in length. Now, I've taught a class before called Theology of Worship. So there's one approach to teaching worship where it's about, music and instrumentation, and those are not my strengths. I don't have a lot of information to teach students on that kind of approach to worship. But theology of worship is a little bit more in my wheelhouse. And so I used this book when I taught theology of worship. I'll make a video on that a different time, the books I used for theology of worship. I consulted with this book and I really like it. I decided though that I think that the level that it's more advanced, and even for upper division undergraduates, I thought it was a little too heavy. I think it would probably be better for a seminary type setting. There's a one paragraph at the top on the back of the book that describes the book better than I could, so I'll just read it. The heart of the biblical understanding of idolatry, argues G.K. Beale, is that we take on the characteristics of what we worship. Now just stop right there. Just that should floor you. Like that should just like cause you to think for the rest of the day. That's what it does for me when I first encountered this book. It's just a fascinating premise. He argues that we take on the characteristics of what we worship. Employing Isaiah 6 as his interpretive lens, Beale demonstrates that this understanding of idolatry permeates the whole canon from Genesis to Revelation. Beale concludes his study with an application of the biblical notion of idolatry to the challenges of contemporary life. This book also begins to address a gap. This is just my opinion, but it begins to address a gap that I identify, at least in the Western church in the 21st century, as I don't think we talk about idolatry enough. And perhaps our discernment of idolatry is a little bit rusty. Sometimes we tend to think of idolatry as like what's pictured on here, a golden calf, like a literal golden calf statue or idol or figurine or whatever. But idolatry does not have to take on just that type of expression in the 21st century, especially in the Western world. And I think that the Western Church could use a lot of refinement in that particular area. So I think this book is very valuable. I recommend it to pastors especially for how it might inform their ministry and their preaching. I think could be very helpful to the church. So Beale's approach in talking about this subject is he takes a canonical approach. He does start with Isaiah 6. That's kind of his foundation to launching into the rest of the Bible. But he talks about becoming like what we worship in the Old Testament, in Judaism, and then he goes through the New Testament, the Gospels, Acts, Paul's epistles, Book of Revelation, and so on. And so then he also does some reflection. So there is some application. There's some theological reflection and some application suggestions as well. And so, but it's primarily an academic work. I think that if you're used to reading seminary type books, if you're used to reading, as far as commentary goes, mid-level exegetical commentaries, you're able to follow those just fine. I think you will do fine with this book. So that's about the level that I would put it at. All right, so I hope this was helpful understanding more about these two theology books from G.K. Beale, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.